So, I want to talk about how friendship is the basis of every great, intimate, connected, mutual relationship. And also how that friendship tends to fade away and disappear for certain types of attachment styles and in certain relationships. I want to help you get some clarity so that you can refocus on what you're actually looking for to build that strong relationship instead of getting caught up on maybe some things that just aren't the best thing to focus on. If you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson. I'm a certified master hypnotist and a relationship attachment style coach. So with my clients, I go back on a subconscious level, help them reframe that programming subconsciously because our attachment style is formed at the same time our subconscious mind is being formed. And we change that programming so that you can step into secure attachment. So you can always learn more at the description below where you can set up a completely complimentary consultation call so you and I can chat and I can make my best recommendation. So now, I bet if you asked anyone what their ideal romantic partnership would be, their ideal person to marry would be, they would say a best friend. I want to be attracted to my best friend, or I'm sure you've heard the comment, I want to marry a best friend that I can't keep my hands off of. And I love it, and I think it's fantastic. But the problem is that a lot of times friendship isn't actually the focus in the beginning of a relationship, especially if one of the people is very performative based. Okay, they are the kind of person who jumps through hoops, who thinks they need to do XYZ, they need to perform in a certain way to get you to like them, to sleep with them, to stay with them, whatever that is. And if that's the case, then you're probably dealing with someone with some type of avoidant attachment style because they see things as a box to be checked or a performative thing to be played out. And instead, they stop focusing on just building a real friendship because a real friendship requires you to be honest, requires you to be able to be at ease, to be yourself, to be silly, to be goofy, to play around, to really let your guard down. I mean, think about your best friends. They are the people that you can be totally 100% yourself with, and you can be stupid, silly, and they're not going to judge you and they're not going to talk badly about you and they're not going to put you down and they're not going to belittle you. But that takes time and it takes consistency and it takes trust before we really know that we are safe with our very best friends. And so, in order to build that in a relationship, you can't be performative because if you're performing, then you always have your guard up. You're always wearing a mask. You're always doing what you are expected to do. And I want to point something out here that I think is really, really important. Have you ever noticed a lot of men don't have good friends? They don't have friends that they trust. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a client where I have been talking about support system, friend networks, and trying to navigate a plan for them where they flat out say, these are men typically that say this. Oh, yeah, I have a few friends, but I don't trust them. I couldn't trust them with anything. They're not trustworthy, but those are their friends. But they don't really think they're trustworthy. Or I hear that they don't have any friends, like acquaintances at work, but no other friends. It's very disturbing how common this is with men. And even the men that say, like, oh, yeah, I do have a couple good friends. Yeah, I probably like catch up with them twice a year. And yeah, I'm open and I'm honest and I tell them what's going on. But there's no regular support system. There's no regular friendship connection. And it's because it seems like men are conditioned to be performative. And if they were actually their authentic self, if they let themselves be seen, if they let their vulnerability be seen, they might be, belittled. And fair to assume that because in this type of patriarchal society, boys are conditioned to shut off from themselves, to shut down their feelings and emotions, to suppress them. And so they're taught that there's shame in that, and they certainly don't want to be shamed. So not as only is it difficult for men to make new friends, but it seems to be very difficult for them to maintain friendships. Friendships take work. They take maintenance. And I know because even as a woman, and women typically are better at making and maintaining friendships. There have been times in my life where I was really busy, I was overwhelmed, I didn't do a lot of the reaching out. I was so grateful I had friends that did the reaching out, especially because I'm sort of introverted and it takes a little more effort for me to do the reaching out. And so I get it that this is a thing that happens, but it's so disproportionately happening with men that it's a concern. And I think it's really affecting the dynamic in the intimate relationship pattern because of this. So, knowing how to make and maintain close connected friendships takes effort. It takes vulnerability. It takes intentionality. It takes reaching out and being willing to be told no. It takes a nervous system that's calm and regulated. It takes you having done enough work that you aren't going to be triggered by someone's rejection. You being okay with them not saying yes to every request. And because a lot of men have never been taught those things, they haven't practiced them, now we transition into the relationship. Everyone wants this best friend to be their partner. But if they aren't cultivating friendship with that intimate partner, real friendship, they're in trouble. Because especially in an avoidant relationship, the avoidant person has a lot of shame and fear around judgment, and they already think that they're not enough. And so that's what makes them be so performative and to do all these things for people because they think that they have to do to be accepted instead of being present, being open, being honest, being human, acknowledging where they need help or where they're hurting. Vulnerability is so real, and they don't like that. So they think they've got to perform because if they get criticized at all, then they're going to be triggered into their shame wound. And so they don't want to be vulnerable because it might open them up to criticism. And so you've got one partner thinking we're building a relationship based on us being best friends and lovers. And then you've got an avoidant person saying, I just have to keep doing X, Y, Z to keep this together and avoiding anything that would create vulnerability and depth, which is how that friendship is formed. And so the goals for each person are different. The person who really wants a best friend to be their partner understands they have to be vulnerable to create that friendship. And the other person does too. And they understand there's depth and connection needed and the ability to just be human. But the other person isn't playing that game. They are playing, let me wear a mask, jump through hoops, and do all the things that I can do. Now, when they're emotionally triggered, they're so wounded and they have so much shame and they have so much resentment that the avoidant is so defensive and pushes back and creates distance and blame shifts and does whatever it takes to push that person farther away from them, or they completely shut down and they ghost or go away. That every time that happens, there is a fracture in the foundation of what would have been the friendship. So you've got the person building the friendship and that fractures their foundation. Like it takes them back. A best friend wouldn't do this to me. A best friend wouldn't call me names. A best friend wouldn't belittle me. A best friend would want to hear my heart and would want to know if what they were doing was hurting me and would want to navigate that and repair conflict. And so there's a lot of confusion that gets created in this dynamic. And assuming that you've got sort of securely attached and an avoidant, which happens, but you might be looking at the dynamic of the anxiously attached and the avoidant, which creates even more chaos. But even in that, I think the anxious attached person has the idea that they also want to be with their best friend. They want their partner to be a best friend. And I think even on some level, the avoidant thinks that. But the problem with the avoidance interpretation of what that looks like is they assume if it's the right person, it will be easy. I won't need to adjust anything. I won't need to look at myself. I won't feel these big feelings when someone brings something uncomfortable up because they won't. The right person would never bring up anything uncomfortable. They just think it can't be the right person because they make me feel things I don't want to feel, unwanted feelings. Whereas the anxious or even a securely attached would be more open to the fact that people aren't perfect, that we're human, that they have flaws, that the other person has flaws. They should talk those things out. They should navigate those things. And so you've got two different perceptions happening at one time. So over time, whatever friendship was there dies because the foundation continually gets eroded by the avoidance of talking about feelings, avoiding commitment, underhanded comments, backhanded things, passive aggressive behavior, things that push the other partner away from the avoidant partner. And every time it happens, it cracks the foundation, it cracks the foundation, it cracks the foundation. And before you know it, the other person's like, I don't know what this is anymore. And so then when the avoidant partner brings them back in and is kind and generous and does all the things and jumps through the hoops again and does their little mini love bombing thing, it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. All of a sudden, it's shallow. It's performative. It's okay, yeah, all right. Because they know deep down, even if they can't put words to it, the anxious or the securely attached person knows my heart is not safe with this person because when I go to be vulnerable and I open myself up and I want to talk about things that are important to me, that matter, they don't have capacity for that. That's not what a friend does. And so the very foundation of everything that they were working for goes away. The basis of a friend is that, yes, they will be honest with you. Yes, they should be willing to tell you the truth and not just pander to you, but they will do it in a loving way. They don't want to lose the friendship. They don't want to lose that connection. They want you to hear them and they want to be kind to you in the process. And so they're willing to communicate. They're willing to talk about it. They're willing to let you fall apart, ugly cry, all those things, because they're not thinking, what am I going to get from this person? Or what hoops do I have to jump through? Or what mask do I have to wear? They're not preoccupied with all that. A real best friend just really has your back. They're on your team. They want the very best for you and they want to be there for you. They aren't preoccupied with their big feelings being triggered and creating distance and avoiding any vulnerability where you might see that they're not a perfect human being. There's an honesty in real, deep, close friendships that has got to be there in a marriage, in a long-term committed relationship. There has to be the ability to feel like I can come home and I can be my fully feeling self. If I had a hard day, if I need to cry, if I need downtime, no one's going to judge me and belittle me because something isn't going perfectly in my life. And so I know we talk a lot about the anxious and avoidant patterns and what happens and all of the fault finding and the avoidance mind and all the stuff. But I think if we just take it back to this thing right here, it's a friendship issue. They aren't willing to let you in as a best friend because that would require you seeing all the parts of them. And this is why they don't repair conflict because they don't want to look at themselves and own their part because that hurts too much. And so you simply cannot be best friends in your relationship if you have a different goal line. If one person is trying to avoid being seen fully and the other person wants to just be real. And this is the saying I say to my clients all the time. I actually just made a hat with the saying on it, but I fully believe it. And it's that you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to have days that aren't perfect. You're allowed to have big feelings. You're allowed to have fears. You're allowed to need to talk stuff out so that you can process. You're allowed to need co-regulation with your partner, with a friend even, that long hug, that grounding presence. You are allowed because that is simply human. That's who we are as humans. And that doesn't mean we tolerate abuse or we should want our partner to just put up with really erratic, abusive, narcissistic behavior, anything like that. Boundaries are always important, but we want to know that the end goal is the same and that we're willing to be real with each other because if you can't do that, then you're coming home to put on a performance. And just imagine if you're the avoidant that goes to work every day, putting on a performance there, doing your best behavior, putting on a show, doing whatever you do to look good in the world. Then you come home and you think you have to put on a performance there too. And so because you don't usually have the bandwidth left for that, and that person, your spouse or your committed partner, is going to be the one person on the planet that triggers you more than anything because you care about their opinion. So if they come home and they have to be performative there, then they end up unconsciously picking fights with their partner to create distance so that they can just piss them off enough to keep them a little bit further away. And it's like a self-sabotage where they believe that everyone's going to leave them anyway or that no one's going to stick around. And so they make it happen by behaving badly. That's not best friend behavior. Best friend behavior is honest and it's real and it tells the other person, I'm having a hard day, or I'm really worn out, or I really could use a long hug, or it's honest. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And so the fact that we're all probably wanting a best friend in a relationship means we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves and in our relationships to move toward that best friend status. And that takes time. It takes repetition. It takes building trust, and it takes vulnerability. It doesn't just happen because you saw each other X amount of times. It happens because you chose to be the real you, open up, and see what that person would do with that. It's really important that we do that in relationships because we find out whether the other person has capacity for our bigness, for our feelings, for our emotions, for our humanity. And if they aren't willing to do that back with you, then just know that they're probably going to create some chaos in the relationship down the road once the performative mask gets tired from being held up and they want to create distance, but they don't know how to communicate it, so they start picking fights. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that helped you see like that your goals aren't necessarily the same. If your goal is to have a deep, committed friendship with a person that you are also intimate with, that you love, it's going to require vulnerability on both sides. And no amount of one person's vulnerability is going to convince the other person to step into vulnerability. No amount of you explaining, no amount of you convincing, no amount of you thinking, if I just help them understand that this is how this is making me feel, it will make it better. It doesn't. They aren't stepping into empathy and they aren't stepping into vulnerability. And those things are very much necessary to create a true friendship. So I help my clients get to that point of being securely attached so that they can be vulnerable in their relationships. They can find out very, very quickly if the other person really, truly has what it takes to build something mutual, which doesn't mean they have to be perfect. It means they have to be committed to growth within themselves and growth within the relationship and exploring each other in their humanity. And so becoming securely attached is the key to entering relationships with a new perspective and a new point of view. And so if you are someone recovering from a divorce, a ruptured relationship, an avoidant discard, if you're heartbroken, my newest program speaks exactly to that. It's the Secure Self Blueprint, and it is full of every single thing that I have done with my clients over the years to get them to this point of being securely attached, secure within themselves, able to hold boundaries, able to communicate. So you can learn way more about that at the link below. Of course, that's always there. And we address this at the subconscious level because that's what's running the show. I'm not just a relationship coach, I'm a hypnotherapist. So my focus is the subconscious mind because the subconscious mind is running over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. But you really don't have access to it, especially outside of the hypnotherapy process. So check out that stuff. I'd love to support you and help you in any way that I can. If this content resonates with you, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked like and subscribe so you can be notified every time I post a new video. And until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.